Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We are here in Washington to speak with Delovan Barwari. He is a representative into the United States of the Barzani Charity Foundation. Welcome, Delovan.
Thanks for having me, Laurie. It's a pleasure being here.
Could you tell us about the Barzani Charity Foundation, when and how it began?
Laurie, the Barzani Charity Foundation was founded by His Excellency, the current Prime Minister of Kurdistan Region, Masroor Barzani, in 2005. The main purpose of the Charity Foundation is to provide humanitarian aid to people in need despite their religious, ethnic, gender, social, political differences. And the priorities are for people, victims of war, violence, and natural disasters, both in Kurdistan and beyond. The Barzani Charity Foundation is primarily focused on providing aid to people in need, but our activities are beyond that. We're currently managing 11 camps, 7 of which are IDP camps, and 4 are refugee camps, Syrian refugees, and we manage everything inside the camps, from the clinics to social and educational centers. We manage about 20 vocational and social centers and educational centers. And one of our major projects is the Orphan Care Project. We support more than 20,000 orphans. Of course, this is made possible with the help of donors and sponsors, our sponsors. What we do is we provide financial aid to the orphans. Usually the way it works in the Middle East is that, in Kurdistan, the way it works is that orphans are kept within the family, somebody within the extended family or grandparents or aunt or an uncle, or even if they have siblings, will take them in. But what we do is we provide stipends every month to them to make their lives easier. And another big project that we have is the Disabled Care Project, and we support more than 1,000 disabled people. We provide them wheelchairs and other equipments to make their lives better. One of my favorite projects, of course these are all very noble projects, one of them is what I call the Back to School program. Every year, throughout the year, we provide 45,000 backpacks full of school goods to elementary students. And this takes the entire year because we provide these backpack supplies to people in need of support throughout Kurdistan and even in the disputed areas. And these are some of the major projects. We also have 3 clinics that we operate outside the refugee camps. And we have an autism center that is completed, but we don't have the funds yet to operate it, and an elderly center in the capital of Kurdistan, Erbil. And we support about 200 senior citizens in that elderly center. And one of our greatest skills and experience is providing aid to disaster areas. And that was the main reason why Barzani Charity Foundation was found. So whenever there is a disaster, and usually there's a lot of disasters in that region, Barzani Charity is usually the first to be there.
Could you tell us what the humanitarian situation is like now in Iraqi Kurdistan and in Iraq as a whole?
Well, this humanitarian situation in Iraq in general is still in dire situation. At the height of the conflict, there were 6 million people that were displaced. That number has dwindled down to 1.8 million now, which means about more than 4 million have returned to their places of origin. But the rate of return has leveled out and in recent months, and that is because of the upsurge of terrorist activities by ISIS and some of the rogue militia groups that belong to the Popular Mobilization Unit, Hajj al-Shabi, have been causing insecurity in some of these disputed areas and in the Sunni region. So the rate of returning has slowed down a bit. In the Kurdistan region itself, we host more than 1 million internally displaced people and refugees. About 765,000 or so are IDPs, and the vast majority, about 40%, are Sunni Arabs, 30% are Yazidis, about 13% are Kurds, and 7% Christians, and the rest, about 10%, are Turkmens and other minorities that are living in Kurdistan region. Out of the refugees, there are about 275,000 or so. There are 250,000 are Syrian refugees. And we also have thousands of Kurds from Turkey and Kurds from Iranian Kurdistan that are living in our region. That is basically the humanitarian situation. But the situation is it has gotten better, but a lot more needs to be done, and security is a major problem for many of them to return to their areas.
That sounds like a very dismal situation that you've described. What is the circumstances regarding your funding?
Well, the funding situation in general is there's a huge gap in funding in all of Iraq. Based on damage and loss assessment conducted by the Iraqi government in 2018 and analyzed by World Bank, the report indicates that it will take more than 10 years to rebuild Iraq at a cost of $88 billion. Now, more than 2 years has passed since ISIS was territorially defeated, and Mosul, Sinjar, and most of the disputed areas, Nineveh Plains, is still destroyed. And so I would say that 10 years is a conservative figure. It will probably take a lot longer. And there was a conference, donor conference in 2018 in Kuwait, and $30 billion were pledged to Iraq, but not much has been materialized. So I would say there's a huge gap in funding, and that applies to Kurdistan region as well. And lack of funding itself has caused a lot of problems both in Kurdistan and Iraq. Many of the international organizations have discontinued their programs or suspended altogether. And that is obviously affecting the livelihoods and situation of IDPs and refugees and the host community as well.
Delovan, could you tell us what the situation is now like in Sinjar?
This is a very timely and important question that you've raised, Laurie. This week marks the 5th anniversary of the Yazidi genocide. As you know, in 2014, ISIS seized districts of Sinjar, Tal Afar, and Nineveh Plains, and as a result, more than 1 million IDPs fled the region. People fled the region, and they took refuge in the Kurdistan region. More than 500,000 Yazidis took refuge in Kurdistan region, and a lot of them were stranded in Sinjar mountain. And about 300,000 Christians are also in the Kurdistan region. Some of them have returned, but the vast majority are still in Kurdistan. So the situation itself in Sinjar is very bad. Most of these Yazidis are living in poor conditions. Most are in cities and towns, but a significant amount live in the IDP camps. And not only the living conditions, but a lot of them have financial issues. Employment is a big problem, and low wages employment and low wages both it's a huge problem. And a lot of those IDPs have no access to education. And many of the Yazidis are also suffering from psychological issues from the trauma that was caused by the genocide that was committed against them. Thousands were killed as a result, and more than 7,000 Yazidi women were taken captive as sex slaves, and to this date, more than 3,000 are missing. So the situation is really bad in Sinjar at the moment.
Thank you very much, Delovan. We will take a break now and continue our discussion about Sinjar. Please stay with us. We will be back in a few minutes to continue our discussion with Delovan about Sinjar.